Gentlemen, please welcome on stage Dr. Agha. He's a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. He's a human-computer interaction and audio interfaces for local languages. That's what he's working on. His research has been funded by Meta, Google, and other top organizations. And he's going to speak today about Internet of Orals. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Agha.
Thank you for the introduction, Umar. I hope you can all hear me. First of all, amazing pleasure to be here in such an elite company. It's a humbling experience. Amazing talks that I've been listening to. So for this discussion, I would actually like to take you to a kind of an alternate reality, a parallel universe, which is simultaneously very far away, but still very close to us in terms of what we have been discussing, in terms of what we talk about when we talk about high tech, when we talk about GPUs, high-speed internet, machine learning, deep neural networks. I would probably like to take you to the other end of the spectrum for at least most of my talk. But before I begin, and let me figure out how to make this work. All right, wonderful. So before I begin, let me quickly talk about what else we do. So that's the meat of the talk, but this is what the other things that we're doing that we're very excited about at LUMS. So currently I'm an assistant professor at LUMS. And I have a center, a lab here that I had, which is called the Center for Speech and Language Technologies, CSALT. And basically we focus on all of these things here. So speech and language technologies per se, speech and language technologies for development specifically, machine learning for development, and ICT for development. Under this umbrella, I would like to talk about these three streams of work that have been going on specifically. So the first one is this work which has been funded by the National Centers for Big Data and Cloud Computing. This is essentially a part of the Crime Investigation and Prevention Lab, which is at ITU, and my part, the speech of work, is currently at LUMS. So the idea here is that we are trying to develop speech technologies in the local context for Urdu and local languages of Pakistan, where we are trying to achieve these three things: speaker identification, keyword spotting, and speech recognition. All of these in the context of Urdu for now. So that's the first. I'm just giving you highlights. I don't have time for the details, so because we need to go to the main topic, but just letting you know in case you're interested, this is the other stuff that we do. The second one, which has been funded by Facebook Research, now Meta, this is in collaboration with Dr. Ehsana Yubkazi and Dr. Aisha Ali at LUMS. So here, the original idea was, and this was 3 years back, that what if and when deepfakes would hit Pakistan, and specifically the tech naive people, the low-literate people in Pakistan, what would be the impact? What would be the potential social impact? What could be the outcomes? That's where it all started from. And once we got into this, we got this funding, so we started working on these three things: the generation of Urdu deepfakes, specifically because I work in speech, so Urdu audio deepfakes, the detection of Urdu audio deepfakes, and finally, the social impact. The social impact work is by now, it's fairly progressing, but I won't be discussing it because this will soon be published. The middle work, the detection part, here we have been focusing on two different things. One, low resource languages, so Urdu context, and the other, low resource settings. So for example, your big data sets, how do you make them work over low resource compute environments? So data set pruning, model pruning, feature selection. So that's what we have been focusing on in the context of deepfakes. And finally, this is the main line of work. So I'll be discussing some of this today. So this currently has been funded by the NIH, the National Academies of Sciences, and the Gates Foundation. So these three projects that I've written here, the first one, the maternal health information for low-literate expectant fathers. So that's basically the catch to it. So this work has been going on since 2017. It was originally funded by the UNICEF, and finally for finding out the behavior change that the project has been able to acquire, and for quantifying that, we got the second funding. The second one is where we are exploring the capability of stories and storytelling to instill behavior change and change of attitudes among people. Again, primarily in the mental health context. And this third one is very recent. We are just hiring for this project right now. This is funded by the Gates Foundation, where we are trying to go to the high-risk districts in Pakistan where people are against vaccination, the routine immunizations for their children. And we're trying to create some sort of a change in attitude amongst those people. Those are the areas where polio is still existent, it's still persistent. So we want to deploy our services to acquire some sort of a behavior change, some sort of an attitude change. With this, let me quickly orient the topic of the discussion for today. For those of you, I know there are students here. So this is basically where we fall. The speech and language technologies for development essentially falls right in the middle of, so we need to work with HCI, with ML for social good, and with speech and language technologies for development. So it's basically at the nexus of these three fields. All right, now we are ready to begin. So the warm and fuzzy internet is amazing, right? It has transformed the world. It has transformed the information ecology, how information is generated, how it's consumed, who generates it, who consumes it. But who are the people in the world who have access to this information? Now, before I begin, let me point you to some literature. Some of you might eventually be more interested in reading more about this. So these two papers, and basically here's a link to my website. So these two papers give you an entire history of the evolution of how this work has evolved over the last 15 years. And these are actually the papers on which my discussion today is based. All right. So the internet, which is available to us right now, is not equitable. Billions of people, and to be precise, 2.9 billion people in the world, which is 37% of the world population, do not have access to the internet. I'll let that sink in. And these numbers do not include people who have very rare access to internet. So when you count, okay, someone has access to internet, it even includes people who have access to internet once a month for an hour, once they go to a place where there is internet connectivity or cellular coverage. So now, close to half of the world is not your audience of whatever interesting technologies you're developing or we're developing. So then, who are these people? These people are either too poor to afford internet-enabled devices, too remote to access the internet, or too low literate to navigate the mostly text-driven internet. All right. So this very foundation of disproportionate access creates these digital divides, several digital divides. So once you drill down into the details, you find, okay, more men than women use the internet. So there goes all of our claims about women empowerment if we are relying only on just the traditional internet. The urban-rural divide. More people, obviously, in the urban settings have access to the internet. And finally, the literacy divide. People who are low literate, non-tech savvy, they do not have means to access what you and I are able to access using our text-based interfaces. All right. So what does that mean? Why is that a big deal? So there was a very interesting talk this morning when Ankit was discussing about the initial times when internet was just being introduced, and there were questions about the ethical implications of what children would have access to and so on and so forth. Those are the questions that we deal with right now when we make the same internet available to these pristine audiences, people who have not been exposed to social media, people who have not been exposed to, let's say, platforms like Coursera or platforms which have crowdsourcing and so on and so forth. How would they react to these things? Given that they are tech naive, they're also low literate, they also come with several other barriers, like, for example, barriers of visual impairment and so on and so forth. All right, so when you do not have access to information and connectivity, it could be a major impediment to people's development. All right, so what options do we have? How can we reach these hard-to-reach audiences? We can probably safely agree that PCs, laptops, and tablets are not feasible. Television and radio are not interactive. Smartphones, a big debate. I won't even start getting into that. So, but yeah, let's, for an argument's sake, assume right now that that's not one of the most feasible ways. And textual interfaces are problematic to begin with. We immediately realize, at least as one possible strategy, that these populations speak and listen. That's how they live their lives. That's how they conduct their business. So speech could be one part of that solution, that jigsaw puzzle. So that could be one piece there. We also realized that most of these people, and this number, by the way, is quickly growing. This is not the most latest, by the way. So it's the global mobile phone penetration is 73%, and this number was there before the COVID. So after the pandemic, it might have grown. I know in many other senses, the COVID pandemic has lifted the numbers of the internet users, but for mobile phone users, I don't have the latest stats. So speech over simple phones, and I'm talking about phones like these, at least, is a viable way of reaching the hard-to-reach populations. And this is where our work began back in 2010 at CMU when I was doing my PhD, when I actually started my PhD. The world had actually realized this maybe around 10 years before that. So the initial voice-based IVR-like services were available. They were being tried in different parts of the world between 2001 and 2010, with the latest of those experiments going around 2010. Some of the biggest challenges identified after this initial realization that, okay, speech is good, simple phones are great. Okay, let's provide this to low-literate audiences. They will immediately figure out how to work with these interfaces. They will get access to information. The world would be a great place to live. Unfortunately, as all of you, with your work and practice, you know that's not how the world works. So immediately as you make these initial services available, you run into these secondary hurdles. And I think this is very generalizable for many things that we do in our most tech savvy world as well. So there was the user interface hurdle. Users do not find, so when you're dealing with low literacy, it's not just lack of a skill, it's a different mindset. They are not thinking about navigating menus when they're interacting with a voice-based agent on the other side. They're thinking of having a conversation with a human being. And that's where the challenge comes in. The second big challenge is motivation and the trust hurdle. You're going to a farmer and telling them, don't use the pesticides that you have been using for the last 100 years or 500 years. Trust me, use this one. Why? Who are you? Why should they trust you? Why should they even use your platform? Why are you coming in and parachuting in and telling them that you have a problem, you should get your children vaccinated? And then finally, the uptake and spread hurdle. These populations, if they are underconnected by definition, how do you advertise to them? How do you spread? So the thing that we came up with was this. Don't make it absolutely useful in the traditional sense. Make it fun. Realizing that for entertainment, and this is actually an actual quote from this amazing paper in 2010. This was from Smith from Microsoft Research India. That if people are motivated by the desire to be entertained, then interface hurdles become mere speed bumps. Users would train themselves if they want to get entertained. And this has been proven again and again and again in different settings, in various modalities. With the motivation and trust, you don't need to convince anyone to have fun. People know that. So your service would have an uptake if it's just fun. And finally, the advertisement, the users would themselves take care of that if it is fun to use, if it is simple. They would virally, a term which has become more popular, certainly between the time when I started working on it and now where it is right now. So people would make it viral. All right? So we developed a strategy. And the strategy was to use viral entertainment as a vehicle, as a conduit, as a pathway to disseminate development-related services. You want to give people information about healthcare? Connect them to an entertainment portal first. And then utilize strategies to give them, once they're connected, once they're hooked, now give them the useful thing. So before the useful, give them what is fun. And this is the first service that we came up with. This is 2011 I'm talking about. So it's just the first service that I'll be going into the detail with. And then for the remaining, all of the services, I'll have enough basis to just cover them in summary form. All right, so Poly, Miami2. This was the first service that we created. We wanted to come up with something which is fun, engaging, yet extremely simple. So we created a platform, which is an IVR platform, just like your different portals where you like press 1 to do this and 2 to do that. So that kind of service, which is a telephone voice-based service, which allows users to make a short recording of their voice modify it using a bunch of fun voice modification impacts. So at that time, that was new. And even right now, for the pristine audiences, it's still novel. So modify it like Talking Tom and allow them to forward the modified recording to their friends. So in the next slide, I'll be basically playing a video for you, which would, can you please play the video? So this is a typical user interaction with Polly. No, आपको वहाँ से चलानी पड़ेगी. No, previous slide. You just need to play.
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अब आप अपनी आवाज़ को तरह तरह के दिलचस्प अंदाज में बदल सकते हैं। बस बीप की आवाज़ के बाद कुछ भी कहें और हैश का बटन दबाएं। हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे ही रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो? क्या आप अपनी दिलचस्प अंदाज में बदली हुई आवाज़ सुनने के लिए तैयार हैं? ये लीजिए।
हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो?
दोबारा रिकॉर्ड करने के लिए 0 दबाएं, दोबारा सुनने के लिए 1 दबाएं, यह आवाज़ किसी को भेजने के लिए 2 दबाएं, अगली आवाज़ सुनने के लिए 3 दबाएं, मुलाजमत के इश्तिहारात मुफ्त सुनने के लिए 5 दबाएं, जिन्हें भेजना चाहते हैं उनका नंबर मिलाएं और आखिर में हैश का बटन दबाएं। बीप की आवाज़ के बाद अपना नाम बोलें, क्योंकि आपकी आवाज़ के साथ आपका नाम भी भेजा जाएगा। फहद। और भी किसी को भेजने के लिए 1 दबाएं, वरना 2 दबाएं। शुक्रिया, मियां मिट्ठू जल्द ही आपका पैगाम पहुंचा देगा। अब आप अपनी बाकी शरारत भरी आवाज़ें सुनें। हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मियां मिट्ठू को आपके लिए एक पैगाम दिया गया है। भेजने वाले ने मियां मिट्ठू को अपना नाम बताया है फहद, और वो पैगाम ये है।
हेलो आरिफ, क्या हाल है? जॉब पे गए हो या नहीं, या घर पे रोटियां तोड़ रहे हो?
इस पैगाम के भेजने वाले का फ़ोन नंबर सुनने के लिए 0 दबाएं, पैगाम दोबारा सुनने के लिए 1 दबाएं, दोस्तों को भेजने के लिए 2 दबाएं, जवाब देने के लिए। अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अब आप घर बैठे अखबारात के ताज़ा तरीन इश्तिहारात बिल्कुल मुफ्त सुन सकते हैं।
ये इश्तिहार 26 अगस्त 2012 को जंग अखबार में दिया गया। लाहौर डिफेंस में ड्राइवर की असामी खाली है। इस मुलाजमत से ख्वाहिशमंद अफराद इस नंबर पर रब्ता करें 5550300115।
All right, so I hope you observed several things in there. The trust mechanism, the forwarding mechanism, which is the viral conduit, the useful service for which we just chose this one. I was doing field research in Pakistan. We were looking for a service to try out the initial idea. We found that, okay, in the newspapers, there are many ads about people who cannot read them. So interesting. So why not record those ads and make them available over Poly for audio browsing? That's what we did. And the next step was we wrote down Poly's phone number on pieces of paper and gave it to 5 office boys at LUMS. I was doing my field research at LUMS. So gave it to 5 office boys at LUMS. We did not tell them anything else. We just said, here's a phone number, try it out, see what happens. That's the extent of the instructions. Within a year and without any advertisement, Poly had received 636,000 phone calls, which involved 165,000 users. And during this time, we were throttling the system because we did not have enough funds to support such a viral spread. So at its peak, it was reaching around 1,000 users per day. Of these users, 34,000 also started using the job ads service. And they listened to the job ads 386,000 times. They forwarded them a lot of times, and so on and so forth. So that was our first proof of concept of Poly. Very quickly, we realized 2 things about Poly. This is basically a retention graph. On the horizontal axis, you see days post a user's first encounter with Poly. So on the first day, everyone encounters the service. On the next day, around 25 to 30% use the service. So on the vertical axis, you see the fraction of users who are still active. So the first thing that you realize is the enthusiasm wears off very quickly, which is exactly what happened to you when you used Talking Tom for the first time. You played for it maybe like 100 times, and then you just gave up. It's boring now. The second thing was a few people continued using the service long term. How long term? Eventually, we found many years. So right now, if I were to deploy a new service on one of our old numbers, I never need to seed. People are calling it every day, even when it's shut down. So that's the kind of loyalty and retention that the service gets. So very quickly, because we're short on time, so Poly was used mostly by Punjabi-speaking men because it was deployed so those initial 5 seed users, they came from Okara and in some other parts close to Lahore. It was primarily used by people who were low educated, low income. So that's the one strata that it hung with. And then finally, we got calls from, so this is like, I call it a chicken pox diagram. So, so the area of these circles is directly proportional to the number of calls from we have received from that area. So you can see major cities are covered, and then we also have dots all over the region. All right, so with Poly's initial success, we continued deploying it all over the world. So during the Ebola pandemic, not pandemic, the Ebola epidemic, it was deployed in West Africa, in Guinea, to spread reliable information about Ebola in 11 local languages. So with these IVR services, the language is no longer a problem. You just need to translate your prompts. In 2014, we worked with babajob.com in India. We teamed up to basically spread their service in India. From 2017 till now, our Super Abu platform, the platform which gives maternal health information to low-literate expectant fathers, that has always used Poly up until now to get spread to these audiences. And then it has also been used as a seeding mechanism for various other services like this Mobile Wani platform in India and Bang and Sawal, which I won't have time to go into the details of, but these 2 platforms in Pakistan. All right, so these were the challenges that we identified after Poly. Again, in the interest of time, I'll just skip over this and go to the next interesting service. Because Poly had low retention, we wanted to come up with a way of getting fresh content onto the platform. So we decided, why not make it a social media platform? So our first social media platform over voice was Bang. So Bang is essentially a Reddit over voice. Anyone can call in, record any message, any other user can listen to the message, they can vote it up by pressing a button, vote it up, vote it down, report abuse, record an audio comment. So everything that you have on mainstream social media, almost all of that is on Bang, with an additional benefit. The benefit is that with Bang, when users are interacting with the platform, you're also gathering that tremendous thing that we're all after, local language, speech data in natural settings. So this is the connection. This is the connection with the work that you do. So very quickly, the stats of Bang. Within 8 months, Bang had received 270,000 calls, 44,000 audio posts, which were created by users. These posts were played 2.8 million times by the users, around 10,000 users of the platform. And we gathered 1,084 hours of audio data spanning around 10 to 11 languages. By the way, this is not the number of languages in the data set. This is the number of languages my team spoke. So their recognition beyond 10 languages was like everything else was another language. So there was a big bin of other languages. All right. So with Bang, we have been doing a lot of things. So again, these are stats. We don't have time. You can go to my webpage to get more details on this. But during the pandemic, we used Bang to disseminate information about COVID to these audiences. And we have performed a lot of experiments here. We have been working with University of Michigan Ann Arbor, University of California, Davis and Riverside, with econ people, and designing these randomized control trials to figure out how exactly the various features of this social media platform are related to persuasion, getting the information across, and so on and so forth. Very quickly after that, we developed 2 other platforms. The first one, you can think of it as like a Quora on voice for simple phones, Sawal. So it's a community quiz platform. Anyone can come in and record a quiz, or they could attempt quizzes. With quizzes, you have now the capability of testing out knowledge gaps in the community. Do you believe, as a healthcare practitioner, that people believe that dengue mosquito lays its eggs mostly in clean water? You want to test it out? Put that question on Sawal, and within 15, 20 minutes or an hour, you'll be getting maybe like 500 responses that you can test out what people believe about that particular myth. And then you could do targeted information dissemination around those questions. And then finally, very recently, we created Karamad, which was our first crowdsourcing platform, where we actually pay users to do various interesting speech-based tasks for us, including translations, including surveys, audio surveys, and so on and so forth. All right, this was just a quick slide on the amount of data that we gathered. I'll stop here. I think my time already is over, so I'll be happy to take your questions.
Dr. Agha, your presentation exactly showcases why we needed this conference in Pakistan, right? I mean, what wonderful work is being done at different parts, different aspects of it, and it needs to be highlighted. So please put your hands together for Dr. Agha. You may not have as many resources as our friend Yasser has with the Meta, but I think they have also granted some of their resources to you for some of the research that you are doing. I think we could do more of that. What you have done amazingly well is targeted the bottom of the pyramid and trying to solve and create a better world for that. So while we run on, for the technology which serves a certain, that leads us forward, we must not forget what we leave behind. And we must cater for some solutions for that. And I think that's the approach that he has taken. And please put your hands together again for that, ladies and gentlemen. We will take more questions, if there is a quick question. Before I come to you, G, I just have a little challenge I'm going to throw at you in understanding how we understood your presentation, right? Because we want it to be fun. So you mentioned two figures. You said that 37% of the global population does not have access to internet. And that includes people who only get once in a while, right? That doesn't even include those people.
Yeah.
So that's 37%. In another slide, you showed that the reason that you want to choose mobile phone is because 73% people have access to mobile phones. To me, these two numbers are the same. Now, the numbers may have gone from 73 to 75 or 77, but then still the 37% don't have access to the mobile phones. So in terms of accessing that 37%, I was trying to understand how does this reach to them? So first, if you would want to answer that. And
great question. Great question. So those two stats are not coming from the same data set. Okay. They're not based on the same population. So it's not that 37% does not have access to the internet, and that's the same 37% who does not have access to the mobile phones. So you have, and I don't have the exact stats to basically tell you, but the populations who do not have access to mobile phones right now are primarily people who are living away from the grid in some way. So for example, people who are living in mountain regions, people who are living in difficult terrains, people who are not close to anywhere where, or simple affordability issues. So this includes people like women who do not have a mobile phone in their home. So maybe the husband has the mobile phone, he takes it with him to the work, and so on and so forth. So the counting is in different ways. So yeah, so the two
and to build on to your, I was just being a devil's advocate there. I wanted to understand that what's going on here, but just to build on what you're saying, it's also the habits and the using patterns which are different. So at the bottom of the pyramid, they may not be that comfortable, all of them going for the smartphone and the internet, but the voice seems much more familiar and much more easy to pick. So there could be different reasons to do that. So that's brilliant, G. Please put your hands together for him and that answer. And you have one question we will take, G. Please, if you can take the mic here.
So thank you for working on Urdu language processing. I think it's very important. We are working on an edtech startup, and we had a use case of generating Urdu voice text. So can you please comment on Urdu speech generation and what is the state of the art? And also, it would be a very interesting use case for us if we can use deepfake. For for generation of voiceovers and stuff like that for educational purposes. So can you please also comment on that?
Great question, thank you. And also thank you for pointing out that very interesting link. Usually people are not aware of that link, that deepfake generation is essentially just text-to-speech synthesis in its basic form. So when you say, I want John's voice as my text-to-speech agent, that John could be you. So it could be like, if I get your training data, I can generate your voice. And that's exactly what we do in our deepfakes project. So we do have our own text-to-speech system. With Urdu, we have been a little bit unfortunate in the sense that it is not one of the priority languages by the big tech giants. So our emerging market is right now one of their priority markets. That's why you're not getting like those high-tech, very expressive text-to-speech systems. And that's what we have been working on. So right now, as far as I know, there are two major text-to-speech systems available for Urdu, one out of our lab, and the other is by Center for Language Engineering, which is at UET, Dr. Sarmad's lab. So there are two, and you can certainly reach out to both, and you can find out if they're the ones for you. I actually have videos on my website where I've compared the two, and we have details on like in what ways they're different from each other and the similarities.
Thank you. I did say last, but for inclusiveness sake, this is the first question from a lady here, so we must take that one. Please, can you bring the mic to her? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the amazing talk. Dr. Saab, last time we met at the ICICT 2 years ago. So I exactly know what you're doing. But I have a question which is on the surface naughty, but believe me, it's with good intention. So let's go back to the time when you were trying to explain people what COVID is and through voice. What is your verification mechanism? What is verification mechanism for information? Because at some time, even WHO was saying it's just a flu. How do you take it back once you've spread it?
Sorry, I would ask you to maybe because your voice is cutting a little bit. So what's our mechanism for doing exactly what? Verification?
My question is, information, before spreading the information, what is your mechanism to make sure it's the right information?
Great question. Wonderful question. And it actually touches many things that you do on social media. And let me basically add to the part that you called naughty. Social media in these settings and in any settings, it could be, or even technology in general, could be thought of as an amplifier. So it could amplify whatever you have on there. If there's reliable information, it amplifies the reach of that. If there's misinformation, it would amplify the reach of that as well. So doing this needs to be done very carefully. So what we were doing was that none of the information that we put on Bang about COVID-19, none of that originated from us. It was just coming from the government of Pakistan main website, the covid.com.pk, I think it was something like that. And there was the NIH Pakistan. So these were the websites that even when we translated, some of those were already translated. Whenever we got some content translated, we had a public health expert in our team who used to verify the translations before putting them on the platform. So that was the first mechanism. And then the second thing was that we were trying out various moderation mechanisms. In fact, it was a randomized control trial, where we were figuring out whether any misinformation would be generated on the platform and how soon can we catch that and how soon can we prevent that from going on the platform. So there was pre-moderation, 2 arms were pre-moderated, 1 arm was post-moderated with very quick moderation, so where the moderators used to get to the content very quickly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agha. It's such a pleasure to have you, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Agha for you.
Thank you.
We have come to the first lunch break for